everybody. Welcome to Truth Teller Tales. I'm Ellen, and I have another warrior here because I'm dedicated to interviewing those truth seekers who became truth tellers, who all have had this unwavering faith during this most incredible time in our history. And I believe these folks are going to be studied for generations. And it's such an honor and a privilege to have on David Whitehead, who I have looked at and watched for years, I believe now. So it's just really wonderful to have him come on. Uh, Sorry, let me bring him on. David, hi, how are
Alan, how you doing? Just want to say thanks for having me. And man, I woke up kind of on the wrong side of the bed this morning, and when I popped onto this podcast, you just totally perked me up. Your energy's amazing. So thanks for having me, and I'm glad to be here.
you? Oh my goodness, thank you. And I'm so glad. I have been looking forward to this because the folks that say sure I'll be on the podcast, I know that they're the ones that are supposed to be on this podcast. And I honestly have watched you for years, enjoyed your authenticity. And Cult of the Medic, I was just transfixed. And I believe it's a 10-part series. Am I right about that?
I'm aiming for 12. I would like to do a few
Oh,
more. I'll explain the issues with that as we go, but 10 for
okay.
now, and hopefully two more to come.
Okay, because it's just you're just so, I feel like anyway, you're just so authentic and wonderful, and I'm just so happy you're here, and I can't wait to hear your story. So just to start out with, I just want people kind of to know what you're doing now, and what you're doing to get your messages out there.
Well, thanks for that. Well, what I'm working on right now is I've been working on, I've had a little bit of a break. It's been summer, been taking the kids camping and all that. But the main focus I've been trying to dial in is getting to the roots of what's been going on. And I do a lot based out of Canada because Canada is just such a prime example of where the powers that shouldn't be want to take the entire Western world. And so it's a good case study, especially for those watching in
Mhm.
America. And then us Canadians are watching what's going on in America as well. And I think all of us, we're just human beings that are watching a kind of a movie play out here. And so
Yeah.
I've been trying to dial in on these things and also the bigger world events. But I don't just look at the events and try to be some kind of shock jock and just go, "Ooh, this is what's happening next. This is what happened. This is what Elon Musk said. This is what Trump just did. This is what the I try to like bring it back to philosophy and bigger picture. I try to do a lot with psychology. I was inspired greatly by. I also co-host a show with my good friend Michael Tessarian, and he and I have been working together on an Unslaved podcast since 2016. Right as Trump got elected first term, and we started
Mhm.
covering deep subject matter there, and it inspired me. And so I've been doing that and doing continue work on analyzing the history we haven't been told about many of these organizations and institutions that are working at the global level, at the institutional level, at the provincial or state level. Where do they come from? You know, some of these organizations we hear a lot in these circles, like the Bilderberg Group, Trilateral Commission, Council on
Right.
Foreign Relations, you know, et cetera. And so I'm always interested in like the backstory behind it. And then I'd recently been doing a really deep dive into the occult history of totalism or totalitarianism. And I started the series off with a show on my Substack called "The Occult History of Communism," and getting into the fact that people like Karl Marx and whatnot were actually members of Masonic orders and lodges, and we've got it all documented. And I just found that's interesting.
Yeah.
And so I'm just trying to get into peel behind the veil a bit more and get a bigger perspective, because if you understand history, this is my belief, if you understand history, you have a precedent, you have a pattern you can recognize that will help you make sense of what's happening now and what could happen in the future. It's not a crystal ball, but it's an analysis of human psychology, mass psychology. What are the things that are used in the media and by government officials or celebrities or whatever as a way to induce these emotional responses in people so that they cease thinking logically? So I'm a main advocate for, I call myself a freedom advocate because everybody's like, what political aisle are you on? I'm like, well, I'm a freedom advocate. So whatever political aisle that is, that's what I'm into. Um, and but like, what are the roots of that? What are the roots of that? Where did we even get the ideas? Like, where did America find the ideas of you should have a right to free speech, private property, all these different things? Where did that even come from? And so
Yeah.
I'm looking at the historical roots, the philosophical roots, because the whole point, as you know, Ellen, is we're trying to preserve this thing called freedom. We're trying to preserve
Yeah.
the Western civilization. We're trying to be a light in the world. And so you have to know what you're talking about when you're going to take up this fight, because the enemies of freedom, the people that don't want freedom to be the standard anymore, they're looking for a totalitarian system, a global world order system, a highly controlled technocracy, a censorship media, those types of people. I want to know what makes them tick. I also want
Yeah.
to know what makes what we call the crowd tick, right? You ever hear like
Mhm.
Edward Bernays? He talks about the public mind.
Yeah.
We talk about a guy on my show a lot called Gustave Le Bon, who wrote a book called The Crowd, and he was doing a study on social psychology. And so I'm pulling all these different threads in for the purpose of trying to enlighten myself so I can know more and have bigger context for all the stuff going on, all the crazy stuff going on, and why everybody's falling for such obvious nonsense and propaganda. So getting into the psychology of that, because if we don't analyze things properly, we're going to miss the right solutions and the right diagnosis,
Right.
right, of how we actually fix the problem, whether we're talking on an individual level or on a societal level. So that's my focus. And then for anybody new to my work, I call my show Truth Warrior because I come from a martial arts background. It's actually my full-time gig. I run a martial arts studio with my wife where I live here, and it's the pride and joy of my life. I love doing it, and there's a unique philosophy behind the warrior tradition that is
Mhm.
unique to this field, to so many ways of looking at things. I always say everybody ignored the warriors and they jumped straight to the priests and the politicians. And I went, maybe that was a mistake. We should have heard all of them out. And the warrior tradition has some brilliant truths that if we would have embodied it as a society, or even if you embody it as an individual, you are in a much better position to face the battle that we're currently up against. And so I try to bring that warrior tradition, the martial art philosophy together with this analysis of what's going on in the bigger world, and then bring it down to the individual level. Everybody feels helpless
Mhm.
right now, but you're not as helpless as you think, and you're not as helpless
Right.
in your own personal life as you think. So my main objective there is to try to turn people who are maybe getting stuck in a bit of victim mindset, victim consciousness,
Mhm.
black pilled, if you want to call it, and trying to
Right.
raise them back to a more victor, warrior consciousness. And that's always been my main objective.
Well, that's fantastic. And before we get into your life, I have two things I wanted to comment about that. One is you're talking about it's so important to know history. Yes. But don't you agree is that a lot of real history has been hidden or covered up? And so I think it's trying to find the true history is what you're trying to do too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of history we have to look at. Um, you can go, I think some people go too far with that statement and they're just like, everything's a lie, everything's nonsense. We can't trust anything the human mind has ever produced historically, or our ancestors, because of the fact that we did find that there's definitely some conspiracies here and there. There's definitely cover ups, there's
Right.
definitely
Yep.
embellishments, there's definitely missing chapters of history, or um, fake history. These are all on the table for me personally. So, absolutely, we always have to use discretion, and that's why I
Yeah.
emphasize pattern recognition. And if you stay close, and my quick thought on that, if you stay close to, if you have the ability to identify genius minds or humanitarian minds, like people that you can tell by, we were talking about Walter Russell earlier, there's certain thinkers and people that just in their work is the evidence of their authenticity.
Mhm.
Those are the voices I try to go to. And it's not perfect, and your judgment you can be deceived, right? But I've been pretty I've found that my analysis on my show over the years has been accurate because of the people I've relied on, that I had at least some decent judgment on some of those sources. And I definitely have also gotten things wrong. So nobody's infallible, nobody's perfect. And the historical record is also not perfect, but there
Right.
is also ways of validating and what you call triangulating knowledge and sources to validate historical events and claims and what happened, what didn't happen. That is a very tedious process, I must say. It's the most boring part of my research. It's the research most people won't do. And then I sadly see on the extreme end of that question, people will say, yeah, but it's just all fake. And I'm like, yeah, but no, not in this case. And here's why. And then they don't even want to hear that. So you can't win either
Mhm.
way. All I say is keep it balanced, trust your intuition, use your
Yes.
logic. You got to put the work in to validate sources. And so that's what I'm advocating people do. And if you do that, you'll at the very least get closer to the truth. You might not get the whole thing, but you'll get closer to it.
I love that so much. I love that. And then the other thing that you said, the warrior side of it, when you said that, a lot of us feel, we're inadequate or inept or whatever. And then through martial arts and stuff, you've learned the opposite of that. But isn't that, David, kind of the psyop that we're trying to get ourselves out of, that we're all victims and we're not, we're not worth much, and it's out of our hands, and we don't have it within us to change anything. Isn't that the mindset that we're trying to get out of? And I think what you're doing is so important, because it's going to be warriors leading the way like you that are going to help others get out of that psyop, don't you think?
Absolutely. It's one of the biggest psyops. We actually perform on ourselves. Like we don't even need
Yeah,
any media moguls or high table propagandists or Tavistock institutes to do that job. They just fan the flames of that. We do it to
yeah,
ourselves. So much of this we do to ourselves.
yes,
And that's why few people can control the world. Like it's because the world wants to be controlled. What if people found that out? What if people found out that one of the biggest fears people have is freedom? When I was working with Michael years ago, he said something that at the time it didn't make sense, but over the years is just like so true. He's like, well, people want freedom from freedom. What? Yeah, because what does freedom bring with it? Personal responsibility. And that's what people really want freedom from. And so it's easier to be a victim. That's the truth. The truth nobody wants to talk about is that the victim is the most appealing status. In fact, we're in the middle of the victim Olympics right now. And we got lots of competitors and everybody's competing for which group. First of all, groups are an illusion. We can get into that. But which group is the most victim? And we're more victim than that other group over there that says they're the victim. And then the guys up there, oh, we're the victim. Look,
right.
anybody's a victim if they believe they're a victim, and nobody's a victim that believes they're not a victim. It's all comes down to an individual choice that you make as a conscious living being to learn how to apply your mind to what you're doing in your life, how to apply uh, some fortitude and personal belief in yourself in order to forge a life worth living. That takes courage. Being a free person takes courage, because it takes courage to stand against a mob or a crowd of people that are afraid of freedom and they don't want it. Look at COVID.
Yes.
Perfect example. That's why I was like,
Huge.
when I did Cult of the Medics, and we can get into that history in a minute here, but just a quick one. When I did Cult of the Medics, I had planned this earlier. I had planned on doing it around 2018 because I had the research all together on sort of the big. You'll notice in the series there's sort of a meta thesis or a meta narrative that's kind of woven together behind the COVID and all the daily political stuff that I inject into it. Each
Yeah.
episode's like a time capsule of the time I produced it, and but the bigger narrative, I had that all ready to go, and then something inside me told me to wait. Speaking of intuition, and so I did, and then 2020 happened, and I got that inner prompting I know you know all about, and it was screaming at me, this is the time to move. And I went, okay. So I just sat back and documented it. And I was off work because everything was shut down. I had nothing but time on my hands. And trust me, the propagandists in this world don't want to give a person like me nothing but time on my hands, because I get bored really quickly. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and read as much as I can and produce as much as I can to try to figure out what's going on and alert people as to what I find. And I'm so glad to see so many other warriors out there doing the exact same thing as me. And they got their inner prompting, and my inner prompting was, this is the time to make that series. So I made the series. and I wove it together. And I was thinking about some of these questions while I was making it, and it was sort of took on a life of its own. And so I feel like people have to find out what is prompting you right now that maybe you might be ignoring. Because when I listen to that inner voice, whatever that is, um,
Mhm.
it never steers me wrong, and it always kind of takes on its own energy. And all I got to do is just keep pushing it forward. And I feel like that's what we're doing in this sort of movement, this freedom movement in all our own rights, is just trying to continually ask these questions, go against the consensus trance, speak the truth, even if your voice shakes. This is the way of the warrior.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And you're talking about the cult of the medics, that it was the timing. And I think to me, because it was when that started to come out, I was in my phase where I couldn't get enough information. I was just downloading all this information. And your documentary series happened to come out during that time when I just couldn't get enough, and I just wanted to watch it, watch it. I couldn't wait for the next one, and so of course it happened at that time, the divine timing, because I think a lot of people were in that downloading of information phase right when you put it out. So it's just when you really look at all of what's happening now, it is so divine and it's just incredible, David. Um, I just feel very grateful to be here.
Well, me too. And I agree with you. And I'm glad what I love about you already, and we've just met, is your positivity. It's rare. Please keep it for the love of God, because everybody that I know, that I grew up with in the movement, in the, what are you going to call it, the alternative research field, conspiracy research, whatever, freedom movement, a lot of them are getting really sour. A lot of them are getting really jaded. We call it black pilled, where they think it's hopeless. And it's the opposite of that, and it's just a matter of how you see what's going on. And so the fact that you're here with bright energy, a smile on your face, you're facing dark subjects with good energy, that's the warrior right there.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that. And I do think, because there are dark topics, obviously, as part of our journey into diving into things, but you do have to have that armor of God around you to
Yeah.
understand the bigger picture and the greater good, of course. And I appreciate you saying that so much. So now, David, I want to hear about you. And so tell me, I just want to start. I want to start where you were born, your family, and just as a kid, just tell me about your life.
Sure. Well, I was born in Calgary, Alberta. I'm a Alberta boy. My mother's side hails from Holland. They were both my grandfathers on that side were actually members of the Dutch Underground when the Germans came into Holland. They were war vets. My great grandfather at the end of the war, he had to walk. He was put in a concentration camp, and he had to walk home from Germany back to Holland after the war was over. And yeah, there's some crazy stories there. On my father's side, they're from my grandfather's from Liverpool, England. He was also a World War II vet. He was with the British, and he worked on the Enigma machines. He was a code decipherer in the war. So I grew up with a lot of the war stories, and that World War II era has been drawing me back in. Speaking of recent things, I've been getting drawn back into studying it again, just for, again, greater context as to what's going on now. And it reminds me of a lot of the conversations I would have with my family, who all experienced it directly growing up. We used to
Wow.
talk about it all the time. And so yeah, I was born. My mother's side came from Holland to Alberta, and I was born in Calgary. And then when I was pretty young, we moved to Ontario and spent some time in Ontario, then went to Saskatchewan, out in the flatlands there, the prairie lands. And then I went back to Ontario and met my wife in, oh my God, 2002. We were on an online chat before there was any social media. It was like some MSN chat. We just met randomly and started hitting it off. She was in Toronto. I was in Ottawa at the time. We had a long distance sort of chat relationship. Then we met, hooked up.
Oh,
The rest is history. We've been together now over 20 years. Got married in
oh,
2009. I'm a father of two beautiful girls. I got a 13-year-old and a 10-year-old, both of them going on 17 in their minds. Um,
Wow, yeah. I
we
mean,
homeschool.
and
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
actually, I remember because when I first started watching you, they were little, and
Yeah,
I guess time just flies, you know. But before we get to that, I want to go back. So you
sure.
moved around a couple times.
Yeah.
How were you? Did you have siblings? Were you the when you moved around? Did you fit in okay? Because you were were you the athlete? Were you the person that just wanted to get along? I mean, tell me about that.
Sure, yeah. No, I did. I have an older brother. He's 2 years older than me. He lives on the East Coast. I'm on the West Coast. And what would be yeah, I definitely well, I was homeschooled in quotes because my parents wanted to homeschool me. And but my dad had to work shift work full time to support everybody. My mother was the main story in my Cult of the Medics inspiration because she was in and out of the hospital my entire childhood, my entire life, and was went into the pharma machine and was just spent a lifetime of drugs and surgery and
Hey, tell me about
sadly
that.
yeah, so I was basically I grew up waiting in emergency room hospital, like hospital emergency rooms, because my mother was always in and out of the hospital with one emergency or another. And once
From
she got
what?
on this hamster wheel of, oh, there was complications after birth, after childhood, or sorry, of birth, both me and my brother, there was some complications that what do? They take the gallbladder out and then, oh, now there's another problem. Here's some more drugs. Oh, we got to take that out now. Oh, here we go. And then now she's got epilepsy. Oh, it's not epilepsy. It's something else. It's a seizure disorder.
Oof.
Is it related to the medications? Well, we're never going to investigate that. So let's just move on. And I just watched her go from one medical expert to another. None of them could help her. She was always getting worse every time. She got addicted to morphine and some other medications that they put her on. She was on a mix of drugs that, like, I was the kid that had to go with those little plastic containers that have the AM, afternoon, PM pills, and like each box was full of pills that these drug pushers would give her. And so for me, I watched somebody live the life of what pharma would love some everybody to live, and it didn't end well for my mother. That's for sure. And it did not, even the duration of her life once that started was absolute hell. It was hell on her, it was hell on the family. Um, and so I had to grow up really fast, my brother and I, and we had to live with other people a lot because, again, my father had to work. He worked shift work all the time, and so he had to do his best to keep everything going, but my mother was in the hospital most of the time. And when she was at home, she had nurses coming to visit her. We would have to take care of her, my brother and I. Then I would have to be the one calling the cab and going with her to the hospital when I was like 10 years old. And then I'd have to go sleep at some random stranger's house my dad met in the church that said, "We'll take them in." And then you're with people, you don't know who they are. And it's like extreme. I grew up with a lot of trauma and anxiety. I got to a point as a kid where I had these things, they called them stomach migraines, but it came from anxiety where you just throw out, vomit in the bed and just like, I wasn't sick. It was just, I was stuck as a kid in that, just, there was no security. There was no consistency. My mother was, you know, always in this state, and it was brutal. So I had to grow up dealing with that. And then that when I got into my early teens, that really started to mess with me. And what really saved my mind from going into a path of depression and anxiety and whatever else could have come from that was I had some really stable people in my life. I had my karate sensei. I had a few close friends of the family that were always there as those positive forces for me. And they were the ones that kept handing me books, like, just go read a book. You can. They're like, when an adult first showed me, hey, if you are, because I was a curious kid, I was the kid with a gazillion questions all the time, right? I'd be the one in Sunday school going, wait a second, I got some questions to, and so they'd be handing me books, and they went, you can actually go out and learn anything you want. There's brilliant people who've written on these subjects. Go ahead and study it. And so when I learned that, it was the studying. If you want to know why I've spent so much time nerding out on all this stuff, it's because I had to for my psychological survival when I was young.
Wow.
and it's what saved me. And then the support of those angels in my life as well. And I've always felt, hey, maybe I've got some other real angels or something going on behind my back. And so really, I was born out of a traumatic childhood, and it pushed me to learn about how much I could withstand and what I was capable of and what I wasn't. And then the martial arts was another huge component. It gave me that social, it was like my safe place, like, because everything else was sort of dark and depressing in my life. But when I would go into the dojo, it was the brightest place in the universe for me. It was just so wonderful. And I met so many great people, and I think to the physical side of it, I was an athlete. I was a natural athlete. It was a little smaller, right? So I had to like really work on athleticism over the years, but it came very natural to me. But it's the physical movement was something that was more therapeutic than just sitting and talking to some shrink, And I did have to,
Right.
when I was in my teens, I had a few episodes and had to speak to some therapists and stuff. And I was just a kid trying to figure things out, and I didn't have the proper guidance and support. And so
Well, David, let me
yeah, go
ask
ahead.
you this because this is so fascinating because I want to go back
Yeah,
because
sure.
this is so interesting. So, because I think I know, so you said that, you had these migraines in your stomach, which I have heard of because my daughter had something like that when she was younger, and she was diagnosed with CVS. Is that what yours was called? It was called cyclic vomiting syndrome, but it was just waves of not actually throwing up, but they called it migraines of the stomach. And there was, and there's nothing more torturous than watching that. And is that what you
Yeah.
felt? There were just those waves of stomach cramping and things like that. That I, and was that what age ish was that? How long did that last?
So for me, I remember it being around like between the ages of 9 and 12. That was the worst
Hmm.
part of it. And I don't remember cramping, and I don't remember like dry heaving. I remember it just like I would wake up in the middle of the night and just vomit. Right? That's what I remember.
Oh,
And I just had butterflies in my stomach all the time. Like just always. So it was like always like background anxiety. That's what it was. Background anxiety that I couldn't get rid of no matter what. And then, you know, that stuck with me for a while. And
yeah,
it took me, I would say I finally purged the end of that. Like, so I call that, like, for myself, that was my era of fear. Like I grew up with the spirit of fear. Okay. And I got intimately related with it. I got to a point where I had many psychological, not breakdowns, but just like you just can't take it anymore. Like overwhelmed. It's like you're running a marathon and you're just so exhausted, but they're telling you got to keep going and you just can't. That's what it feels like. So I feel like that forged me. That actually strengthened me. Today I look at it like a gift, even though it was hell, and I don't wish it on anybody. But for me, I wouldn't have the strength I have without it. I wouldn't have the motivation I have without it. I wouldn't have the perspective I have without it. So I've learned to count it as a blessing, even though, yeah, life probably could have been better without it. But you got to turn lemonade into lemons into lemonade, in your life. You gotta have that mindset of seeing these instances in your life as a way of forging you into something that you otherwise wouldn't be capable of being. Right.
right,
And I found that, to me, and I'm sure you're going to see this as you're exploring this on your show, a lot of the best, most brilliant people I've ever met, they come from a traumatic background. They come from an abuse background, or like even the best artists I've ever met, the most brilliant artists I've ever met come from just torturous childhoods, you know? So I find that interesting. And that always gave me hope to say, oh, I don't have to live in this prison of fear. I don't have to be this. This is not what I am. This is what I'm experiencing right now because of these factors. Like that took me till I was 19 to figure out that I'm not destined to be this. I'm not destined to be some failed drug addict because I'm depressed all the time. Like I would, that was the mindset that I guess society would have expected. But for me, I just had this inner refusal to quit in me, and I'm glad for that. And again, I think martial arts helped me. And I grew up watching the Rocky movies. He was my mentor, and gotta lie, you just keep getting back up. And so that's
Yeah.
what I did. And so when I was like 19, 20, that was around the time I met my wife. Um, I was I had psychologically, I feel like I had psychologically defeated that old fear that was haunting me my entire childhood because I didn't feel it anymore and it didn't keep coming back. I felt like I had slain that dragon, and to this day it has not returned. And I can look at, and
Wow.
it's not because I repressed anything either. Like I did not repress a single. I went right straight, looked it right in the face, and to this day, even anytime I have these revelations, my wife has seen this a few times where there's still some little remnants of that remaining. I've been able to just stare it right in the face, deal with it, and move on. So one suggestion I can give to people that might feel that they've had similar types of experiences is to never run and hide from it. You got to go into the underworld journey. You got to dig deep into the basement of the places that you don't want to go. You have to walk into the caves you fear to enter. That you have to embody that spirit because that is the only way. And I'm living proof that without medications, without sitting there in front of therapist after therapist, you can heal your psyche from trauma to a degree. You're always going to be scarred. You never get rid of it completely, but you can become the master and commander of your mental destiny if you face that inner darkness, you face that shadow. And you have to find the courage to do it. And courage doesn't mean you're not afraid, by the way. It means you're afraid and you do that anyways. And that's what I had to
Yeah.
learn. It took me a while. And thank God for the influences in my life that kept cheering me on. Because without them, I don't know if I would have made it.
So I have to ask you about timetables because I feel like part of your story that everything again, talk about everything being divine. So how long was your mom's journey? When did that come to an end here on the planet
Yeah,
for her?
so she would have been, so it was after, so I'm the second born. My brother's older than me by 20 months. We're almost 2 years apart. After my mom had me, she had some complications medically, and it just started with, like, the gallbladder being removed. That's all I remember her telling me, and then it kinda just went from there, and then she got on some medications and then got some diagnosis, and then, you know, it just went down. So, basically, my whole life with my mother was me watching her battle this illness that was never named or defined, this constant just needing to be trolleyed off to the doctor, and, maybe part of it for her was psychological. I had to face that. I had to face the fact that there was definitely things in her. Like I can't just blame only the doctors and pharma and all. It was a
Mhm.
two-way street. And maybe a part of her wanted to be in that status. Maybe a lot of people think that they're going to get the care and the coddling from the medical system that they maybe never got from their parents. So there was a bit of
Mhm.
psychology in that too. And then she passed away right as the COVID stuff was kicking off. So in 2020, and it was due to heart failure. It wasn't due to COVID. Made sure they didn't list her as one of the deaths because that was going on, right? They were listing everybody as
Yes,
dying of COVID. You got in
that's
a
right.
motorcycle accident, you died of COVID. No,
That's right.
yeah. She had a heart failure. She had had like a stroke about 8 months before, and lost a bit of her speech, and then the next time it was heart failure and they couldn't revive her. And she actually had a do not resuscitate. She requested a do not resuscitate. But either way, it wouldn't have mattered. They couldn't save her at that point. And so I got the call from my father then, and it all happened. It was weird because my wife and I, we live in British Columbia now. We live on the island, beautiful out, by the ocean in the forest. And we had worked to move from Toronto out here for a long time. And we finally had moved out. My wife's family it lives up here, and that's why we kept coming. And we were renting at the time that the lockdowns happened, and we were looking for a house. And it turned out that the timing worked out that we found a house, we closed on the house, we got a killer deal on the house that we got, and it closed 2 weeks before the lockdowns. And I remember having the conversation with my mother where she was congratulating us. This is a huge thing. and then it was like a few weeks after that that she passed. So in a way, I almost feel like she helped me get this home. She helped me
Yes.
facilitate this dream for my family, right? It was her last
Yeah.
act, was to like take care of the family, and
Yes.
I don't know, there's something about that. And then
Yeah.
the lockdowns happened, and I remember just this home has become my refuge and my temple, because it sheltered me from the storm of the COVID nonsense and the insanity, and it sheltered me during the grieving process for my mom. And
Wow.
and so yeah, it was just an interesting series of events. But yeah, that's how it all went down.
Wow, that is so interesting. And then before, you were still kind of in the storm, with your mom's illnesses and stuff. But somehow along the way, you said 19 or 20, you went to therapists, obviously, and then you had some mentors that had you read books and things. And so you think the accumulation of all of that helped you kind of have these revelations about you and what you needed to do and what kind of tripped you up in the past? I mean, what are you thinking about that?
Yeah, I like the word revelations because it wasn't like a disease that you know how they talk about psychological illness, right? It's like they
Mhm,
talk about it like you caught the flu or something, and it's like a disease that's possessing your mind.
mhm,
It's not. For me, it was distorted thinking.
mm,
Distorted thinking. What is fear but an illusion? Like it, and I'm not talking about there's rational fear, right? There's things that are rational. You should be rationally afraid of, right? But
right,
like that lingering fear that's there, whether when there's nothing to truly be afraid of. What is
right.
that but distorted thinking, right? It's a
Yeah,
delusion. And
right.
so to defeat something like that, where you're told, like I was advised, oh, you need to get on Paxil and you need to get on these medications, you need to go to these therapists and blah blah blah. I didn't want to do that. I'm like, I'm just going to go and do my martial art training and read some Carl Jung and some Bruce Lee and some
Mhm,
watch Lord of the Rings and learn about the how to fix distorted thinking. And
yeah,
then I got into self-help books, read lots of people like Nathaniel Branden, Krishnamurti, Alan Watts. Like the deep spiritual thinkers were what helped give me perspective on life, the meaning of life, the purpose of life. That's why I love philosophy, was that a lot of my fear was due to, well, my experiences, of course, but like you have to, when I grew up feeling as a youngster because of the conditions that I was alone, that was the worst part of it. I'm alone. Where's my parents? I'm lost in the mall. Like that's that feeling that you have. That's where it starts as a youngster, right? And then nothing's normal, nothing's consistent. That's the feeling you get when you're moving around all the time and you're living with people you don't know. And the feeling of uncertainty and I'm out of
yeah,
control. That was the feeling I
right.
felt when my mom was in the hospital all the time and I couldn't save her and I didn't know how to get her back to normal. And it was like, because I had a
Yes.
good relationship with my mom, right?
Yeah,
There's the good old mother-son relationship that's a sacred bond, right? It's a unique bond that every son has with their mother that uh, maybe not every daughter has with their mother. It's just a unique
mhm,
thing. So I had that, and so I guess that all those things I was able to get them back in order in my mind and learn
right.
to accept reality, accept the situation, accept the who I was and what was going on inside of me, learn to accept the things about myself that I started learning to disdain during that time, because it's amazing how quickly trauma that has nothing to do with you you start to convert it into uh what do you call it, self-hate or self-loathing or whatever,
Self-sabotage?
self-sabotage, and then you start adopting victim mentality. And when you
Yes,
start adopting victim mentality, you start feeling more helpless. And then the
yes.
only way you don't feel helpless is when someone comes to save you, right? And when I finally got into the mindset of maybe nobody's coming to save me, because that would actually get in the way of the development I'm supposed to have here in this life, that I'm not supposed to be saved. I'm supposed to save myself in this regard. This is my responsibility. If I want freedom in my mind. So I learned about freedom from this. I learned about what's it like to have a tortured, anxious, frightful mind. Is that freedom? You could give a person like that all the freedom constitutionally that you want, but they are not a free person. They're an enslaved
Right,
person, right? Mentally to themselves,
Yeah.
you know?
Yes.
And so I had to go through that and go, wait, so I can't just blame the world. I can't blame my parents. I can't blame the situation. I can't just blame the doctors. I can't just blame, the cult of the medics. I've got my own piece here that is sacred. And actually, when you do that, what I think this is the biggest breakthrough I had was I realized, wait a minute, I actually have the power to conquer my fears. I actually have the power to take enough responsibility in my life to not become a victim, to not blame the world, but to, despite it all, still rise out of the ashes of that and go ahead and do great things and live the great life that I knew was. Well, I had to get down. What was the root of the fear? Well, the root of the fear was that I wasn't going to live the life I wanted, which I was a natural, like, I want to live life. I want to go and
Mhm.
conquer the world. I want to do all these amazing things. Like, that's the spirit. That's my natural spirit. So I had to connect to, what is my natural spirit? Who am I really outside of this trauma I've experienced in my life? Like, who's under that, you know? Well, that's what the source of the fear was. The source of the fear was that the real me was going to be suppressed for the rest of my life. That was the fear. But then when I went, wait a minute, I'm the one thinking both sides of that thought. The real me is the one and I'm the one thinking it. That means I have power to change that. And when I just decided to believe that, because maybe people go, you don't have the power to change. It's all deterministic. Like, if we had Sam Harris in the room, he'd be like, no, it's all psychological determinism. I'd be like, no, it ain't, bro. I'm living proof that it's not. Because it's about, what do you believe? What do you believe in your
Yes.
head? What are the lies we tell ourselves aside from the lies other people tell us? So if I got good at spotting my own lies I was telling myself that were leading me to that frightful mind, I think that's what gave me a little bit of a different perspective on the big liars in the room. The big lies were told, is that I kind of was like, oh, that's bullshit. Like, you could just see it. Right. So yeah, I guess that's my best answer on that one.
Well, there it is. I mean, that's so cool because you had to figure that out and the lies that you were telling yourself in your own little bubble to
Yeah.
be able to then go to the other bigger bubbles and understand the deception there too. Oh my God, that's so cool. That you figured that out. But the thing that I admire too about you is that you were able to, because of all those things that came together at the same time, I don't know, but you were able to psychologically figure that the most momentous thing you can possibly figure out, that the greatest freedom you can have is having self-responsibility, which is also the scariest thing you can do. And you were able to take that leap of faith
Yeah.
to figure that out on your own with some angels along the way. That's pretty dang cool, David.
Well, thanks. I mean, the way I look at it is, it's the only way to do it. Like that, like,
Yeah.
because I think I've seen enough of these, help circles and, 12-step programs, and here's the self-esteem self-help stuff. There's some good stuff in there, but it's very group oriented. And maybe there's
Mhm,
people that they work better in that environment. Maybe it's just
mhm,
my own personal nature. Maybe it's the product of my childhood that I've just described. I don't know, but I just
mhm,
know for myself that every time I would go to some group council meeting or some group thing, I didn't come away with, like, progress. It was when I went within and was solo, when I was in solitude, when I'd be sitting by a lake, when I'd be sitting
mhm.
looking at the birds by myself. That's when I would hear the voice inside me. That's when I'd hear my true voice. And because I didn't have all this noise of all everybody else's voices in the room all the time. I felt like that was worse. So in a way, at least for me, it
Yep.
was getting away from the crowd, getting away from the chaos and the circus of everything, and just sitting with myself. Then I dealt with it. Then when I went out back into the social world, I was far better. It just got far better, and it just continued to get better. And I noticed
And
that.
don't you think, David, too, that maybe I'm reading too much into this, but don't you think that that is part of the psychology of what we've been told? The deception that you're supposed to be busy, you're supposed to be hectic, you're tired, you're working, you're tired, you're working, so that we don't have time to go to that quiet, meditative place to actually come up with these most amazing inner thoughts that could change our lives?
Oh, you're not reading into it too much at all. You're reading right into it. That is exactly what I think it is that whether that's something done by some controlling elite or whether that's just a sort of a, a thing that we do as humans, instinctively, either way, you've hit it on the head that the world will try to bend you to their will and say, you have to listen to everybody else but yourself. Here's all the
Yeah.
experts. Here's the lineup of experts. Look at CNN. Here's all the political experts. They know better. Here's the medical experts. I think we're sick of experts. I mean, we need expertise, okay, for sure, but it's been abused to a point where it's like, okay,
Yeah, it
when the
has.
smallest people in the room are the ones saying we're the experts now, I'm a little bit suspicious. I became my own, what do you call it, expert, but on just myself. I'm not an expert on anybody else. I'm an expert on me. I can tell you, like I just did, exactly
Yep.
where I identified the things I had to conquer within myself. And the only way to do that is to take that time and sit with spirit. That's who you're communicating. So when you leave the noise of all the other people around you, just for 5 minutes once in a while,
Mhm.
you're communing with all that is and all that ever will be. You're with something you're not alone at all in a weird way. You're alone, but you're like not it's so I don't know how to explain it. And I felt this even during lockdowns when I would go. There's this beautiful we call it Four Beaches. It's right across from my house, and it's right on the ocean. And there's like some cliffs and whatnot. And it became my church. Like I was there all the time because it was the only place that was open. Everything else was taped off with police tape. We don't want people to get the flu, right? So I was there all the time, and I would feel the same thing there that I felt when I was going through those hard times, which is in a weird way the more alone I was, the less alone I felt. And I don't even know how to justify that. It's just that's the feeling. I just went like I felt sometimes more alone when I was in the crowd than I did. But when I was alone in this context, okay,
Right.
that I'm like, I'm not alone. It's weird. I don't know how to explain it.
How cool is that, David, though? Because as a kid, though, you said that you were alone a lot. It was unsure, and being alone and it was unsure and it was out of your control. But now, as an adult, you can have that alone time, but feel in control. And it's powerful in such a good way. How cool is that too?
I know it's the coolest thing. And it's funny because as a personality, I'm a very social person. Like
Yeah,
I really love people. I love being out. I used to love going to concerts and go to the mall and just be, and I'll still do that sometimes. Now it's much smaller doses I can tolerate than when I was younger. But I have that. And I think that's why I love the role I have at my business, my martial arts studio, is that it's the ultimate community. It's the place that I get to be with people, right? And but I definitely love my alone time because, like I said, I'm not really alone. I feel like I'm with that spirit that was always there through my childhood. We can call it God, we can call it whatever we want. It's just there. I don't like defining it too much because of how much respect I have for it, whatever that force
right.
is. And so I sit with that and I don't feel fear. I don't feel alone at all. And so I sit with that and it recharges me. It invigorates me. It's where I get my inspiration. It's how Cult of the Medics came to be. It's how all my research comes to be. If I'm not producing my best work, it's because I'm not sitting with that voice. I'm just kind of throwing things
Yeah.
together. And then when I do my best work, it's because I was sitting with that voice. So whatever that voice is, keep it up. You're doing a great job.
Yeah, exactly. And so I usually wait to talk about this at the end, but this is the perfect timing, I think. One thing I have noticed about talking to folks like you, who are such warriors, is that your faith and your spirituality has grown. Some folks, it happened with the blink of an eye, and others it just progressed over time. How has that been kind of in your life, that growth, that connection that you feel?
Oh yeah, I was a topsy turvy one. I was sort of off the road, on the road, back and forth. I went through a lot of phases. My parents raised me in a very strict religious upbringing, very like Baptist kind of upbringing, and presented spirituality to me in that way. And it's what actually inspired me to go and do comparative religion mythology research, because I was just curious about these things in general. And I always knew there was something to it. And then I think in my after I was coming out, like in that around that 19, 20-year old age, as I was coming out of my dark night of the soul, or whatever you want to call it, I started going more towards atheism, and where I was just like rejecting all spirit, all anything mystical, anything related to religion or anything like that. I was just like, no, all it does is lead to war and division, and and I wasn't able to separate the human addition to spirituality and religion from the truths within those things themselves. I wasn't able to separate that, and that's why I started embracing atheism. Now, I learned a lot during that time that was also valuable, but then I came back full swing because I went, no, it didn't feel right to me that this is just some meaningless material existence and we're just hunks of meat and there's no purpose or meaning in life. Like it didn't, it never resonated with me, but it was just like a
Yeah.
logical position that I took. And I mean, people still go that route. I still respect it and I understand it. But for me personally, it was maybe around 23, age of 23. I started getting back into more of a spiritual view of things, and really getting into that on a deeper level than I'd ever gotten to. And um, I do produce on my show, on my Substack. I've produced a lot of my research in comparative religion mythology, and I give my thoughts on it, and that. But I definitely know I don't believe anymore. I just know deep in my heart that there's, a great spirit, force, God, whatever you want to call it. I don't like labels. Um, but we all know what I'm talking about, that there's
Yeah.
something there that permeates all things, and is part of you, and there's a part of that in you, and that's what you're communicating with. And that the fears and the doubts and all the things I was going through were products of this world. They were products of my experiences. They're products of opinions and things people contributed to my life, um, as has been some of the positive things. So I had that ability to go, look, there's a prime force, spirit or soul essence that is me, and then there's what's constructed on top of that in this life.
Mhm.
And when I started to see that, it just killed atheism for me, personally.
Mhm.
And so now, but I'm also not really very religious in a dogmatic sense. I
Right.
think there's brilliant truths that, and we could do a whole other show on this, in all these different religious traditions, that we've all had little pieces. I kind of take that Rumi quote. He was one of my favorite poets, where he was talking about truth being a mirror that fell from heaven and shattered into 1,000 pieces, and then people came from all over the world and pick up a shard of that mirror and then thought they had the truth. So to me, that describes the history of religion perfectly. And I've been on that track ever since, and it's what always resonated the most with me.
Mhm.
But yeah, it was interesting to me that I took that turn where I went through what I described with this feeling like, there was another part of me and the voice within and all of that, and how I came out of that fear part of my life as sort of an atheist was kind of weird, right? Um, and because how I was just lived the evidence that there's something there, but maybe that was necessary for me to get even closer to it later. Maybe
Yeah.
that's how it had to go.
Yeah. And that is such to me, and I hear people talking about they don't believe in anything bigger, but they love nature. And I'm like, what do you think that is?
Yeah,
And
what do
it
you think?
and I just think as people begin to make those connections more, that that'll be a greater place to be, when people start to understand those connections. Well, I have to also just talk about for a minute or so your martial arts because ever since I've watched you, that's always been a topic. I remember way back watching your podcast, it was your journey of finding a facility and I just remember that. And so obviously that's affected you and now you're teaching others. So that has to be, I was a singer and then I became a vocal coach. It was an important part of me to teach others. And so what I loved. And so tell me about that journey of going from a student to a teacher.
Hmm, that's a good one. And by the way, okay, I was wondering where you got your fantastic voice from because you're good for
Okay.
podcasting. You got that voice. Um, yeah, no, for me, I this was part of the solo journey for me. Nobody really came to watch much of my martial arts. My dad did when he could. My mom couldn't most of the time because she was at home in bed. And so when I was walking to the karate studio up the road in my little town, that was a solo thing. And
Mhm.
then it just kept me going. And my brother went a totally different direction in his life. So that was the martial arts draw started in books, actually, books and watching some movies and some Ninja Turtles and stuff as a kid. And I was like, "Ooh, what's that?" And because I was looking for personal empowerment because I was feeling not powerful at that time, so it made sense
Mhm.
the psychological reason why. But then it
Yeah.
became so much more. And so I was the guy, I was the student. I was the guy who was first one there, last one to leave. I was there every day. They used to call me a dojo rat because I just lived in the place, you know? And then I would leave that art and then move around and go everywhere I moved or lived, or I've been places where I've done short jobs in certain places. I would go find like a boxing gym, a jiu-jitsu gym, a karate gym, a kickboxing, anything, just anything. I would go find it and do some kind of training. And so I was the eternal student. Okay. Even to this day, I still have coaches. I still drive to go train with some of the best guys around just to keep myself in the game as a student. Cause I believe it's important to still be a white belt, you know, but to teach, oh, I'm going to get emotional about this. It's such an honor. Like I feel it's my joy because there's something that's I'll tell you this really quick. During the lockdowns, we all know what they did to the kids, right?
Yeah.
Psychological damage is what they did to an
Yes.
entire generation of young children needlessly. Um, and when I remember my students, my kids, because I teach all ages. We have the young 4 year olds, then we got the 6 to 10s, then we got the tweens, and we got the adults. And when I before I had a good community of kids in my school before the lockdowns. Then the lockdowns hit. We lost that facility. That facility was shortly turned into a homeless shelter. And then very shortly after, it was burned to the ground for some reason. So it was the only big facility in my small town that I could use for a martial arts studio. So for like 2.5 years after that happened, I wasn't teaching. I was not teaching. I was making call to the medics. I was at home doing podcasting full time. And then and I was starting to feel that like, oh man, I'm missing a part of my purpose here. Like I'm missing a part of myself. And then we finally got a hold of a space and we reopened. And now we're in an even bigger space and it's beautiful. I call it the dojo in the woods. I'm not moving. That place is perfect. Everybody that comes is jealous of it. It's just so beautiful. And I
Yes.
saw the difference when we first reopened after lockdowns in the kids. And the kids were all just a quivering mess. You know, they were just afraid. They would all sit 6 feet apart automatically. They wouldn't want to touch each other. They were all whiny and just, they weren't like, no, I could just see, I'm like, oh my God, we've spoiled a generation. Right. And so and I remember doing all the shows and doing all the work to try to expose these lies and fight for the kids. And I remember like hashtag save the children. Like it meant a lot of things to me at the time. Um, and when I got to go in for the first few weeks and work with these kids and go, look, guys, not only do I want you to sit close to each other, we're going to be getting as close as possible because jujitsu and wrestling and that kind of art is very hands on. Okay. You're right up there. And I watched them literally change over a period of about a month or two, where I took them from this quivering mess to warriors. And now I've got a competitive team. They're probably going to go compete at Worlds. They're a big team. They love it. The community's thriving. These kids are all bright and shiny. They're full of confidence. The skill they have, the talent they have, the look on their face, the shine in their eyes is just it's there's no money in the world that could ever make you feel like that. There's no anything else. And I'll share a quick story, and I've got hundreds of these. There's one example I have. I've just recently, this young girl, she was just the quiet, eyes down, very not athletic at all. But her father like made her do jujitsu. He's like, you have to learn self defense. I'm gonna make you go. She's more like a ballet girl. You know what I mean? And and so he made her go, and Then he signed her up for a tournament. And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know if that's gonna be because she doesn't have that, like, killer instinct, you know?" And so he's like, "No, but it'll be good for her." So I was like, "All right." So I trained her the best I could. We go to the tournament. More than half of her division is also boys. Because in jujitsu at that age, they mix the boys and girls because jujitsu is about smaller people beating bigger people, right? So I went, okay, this will be interesting. So she goes in and she's literally shaking like a leaf, waiting for her name to be called up. So I just go up to her and I'm like Olivia, hey, we've done this every day for the past 3 months. Let's just do it again. Imagine you're training in the dojo and we're about to play a game. We're gonna play the game we played. So just go play the game we just played like yesterday in class. Let's go play that game with this opponent and see what happens. So she goes in, and I could tell she wasn't even like doing anything properly in the beginning because it was just she was so afraid.
Wow.
And then she's on the bottom position. So the other person scored a takedown, passed her guard, got on top, and is in a pin, which is the point of jujitsu. And she starts, I see her crying on the ground. And I'm her coach. And there's still like 3 minutes left in the round. I'm looking at her and I'm like, it was lucky that it happened close to me. So I'm looking at her, I'm like, Olivia, hey, we've been here many times with way bigger, stronger people. You're good. Make your frames. And I just started talking her through it. And I got her clicking back in and she started pulling herself back in. And then she just starts going and going and ends up doing a sweep, taking the back, scoring points, wins by 1 point, wins the fight by 1 point. So I was like, her face was like, oh my God, oh my God. And that was with one of the girls in the division. So she gets to
Oh,
advance to the next round. Next round, a boy. She's like, "Oh my god, I can't do that." She's like, "I can't do that. There's no way. There's no way." I look at her and I said, "You are going to take this boy's back and put him in a body triangle, and you're gonna put that bow and arrow choke on this boy. It's what you're gonna do. It's what's gonna happen." And she's like, "No, it's impossible." And I'm like, "No, no, go, go, go. I promise you." So she goes in, she again crying during the fight on the ground. She's terrified. This guy's just is destroying her. And I'm like, no, no, no. And sure enough, she pulls it together, takes his back, bow and arrow choke, wins by submission, beats a boy by submission. She's standing there.
wow.
The ref, everybody's freaking out. Her parents are freaking out. The whole team's there. The ref is raising her hand as the victor. This is the moment for the story. I'm sitting there looking at her face. That face that she had will be burned into my memory for the rest of my life because that face is what I work for. That face is what psychologically healed me from all the trauma of watching what they did to these kids over COVID and through all the other
Yeah.
crazy stuff going on in the school system and the stuff they're doing to disempower kids. And to watch her have that victory, that face was victory when you
Yeah.
didn't believe you could do it and then you
Yes.
did do it, her life will never be the same. And she you should see her in the dojo. I was just with her yesterday. She is an absolute assassin now. She's unstoppable, this girl. She's 10 feet taller. And I have many stories like that. So I'm addicted to this now. I'm addicted to turning kids into winners in my community. So if I've been taking a bit of time off Truth Warrior and stuff here and there, it's because I'm doing this now. It's very direct. I am helping, I am seeing physical effects in these kids. That is just unbelievable. So it's a huge honor to do this work. It's what I live for now. And that's the hope. For anybody that feels hopeless, the kids are the hope. They're fresh slates,
Yes,
and we can
they
fix
are.
them by teaching them who they really are. And when you get to witness it, your life will never be the same. And this is how we heal things.
Absolutely. I love that story so much. And the fact that, what's cool is you're getting to affect these kids right in front of you, one by one, and they're going to spread it as well. But you're also doing your podcasts and your documentaries and doing things like that and informing people and empowering them with your knowledge and information at the same time, David. I just admire you, and that's what this time is all about, and that's why there are certain warriors like you that are supposed to be here to light the way. Because if you weren't, then we'd be in a heap of trouble. So it's just glorious to hear your story, and
Thanks.
I'm just so grateful to hear it, and I admire you even more, even though I always did, just watching all your stuff. Um, I really did. So just keep up the good work and keep inspiring people all over the globe and right in front of you because it sure means a lot to all of us.
Oh, well, hey, it's an honor to do this also. And I'll just say real quick, like I always did this because I felt like I had to because people did this for me. Like I have to pay it forward. I didn't want to just keep all this stuff to myself. And so if anybody has had that positive effect from the stuff I do, that's huge. But I'm paying forward the debt that I have to the people that pulled me out of it. And so
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, if those people and those books and that information were not there, I don't know what my life would have been. So that's what
Exactly.
motivates me as well, is I'm not trying to do this for fame and fortune. I'm trying to do this because it's a paying forward of what's been done and served for me. So that's what and that is the warrior tradition. That is what you are
Mhm.
required to do. You're to become the student and then the master and then not to become a dictator or an ego freak, but to raise other masters and other warriors and pass it on. And that's how we have to keep going.
Mhm.
And so I'm just trying to pass the torch. And it's the best way I could think of doing it. And also, there was a deep part of me with one more thing about teaching these kids martial arts. Um, just all this stuff going on, what we're hearing in the news with all this pedophilia and the trafficking and the abuse and the stuff in the world, the evils of the world. What better thing to pass on to these kids than giving them the ability and the courage to defend themselves, to stand up for themselves? I feel like a lot of the derangements going on in our society are coming from people that lack self-esteem, and they actually is possessed by a hatred of themselves. And I knew what that felt like because I grew up with it. So um, if you give a kid that gift of teaching them who and what they are, they're not going to be the targets that predators are looking for. And that alone is self-defense. The fact that they walk with their head held high with confidence and strength, um, the, evil's not going to want to mess with you, you know? And so what better gift to give to these kids?
Agreed, David, and I have to say it takes us full circle to that victimization, and even I think all of us who are able to mentor as a vocal coach, I would watch people, my students, kids walk out with such confidence because they knew how to sing, and you see
It's amazing.
athletes building themselves up and they have coaches. It's such a mental game of confidence which comes with self-responsibility. But we're there. We're at the moment of this next generation is going to be pretty kick-ass, I think, because I think it's going to be a change with help with folks like you. So I'm psyched. And I'm just I'm just so excited to be able to talk to you, and I will continue watching you for sure, because I
Same.
just
I'm going to watch
admire
you
all
all.
that you're thank you, and I just admire all you're doing, David, and we'll continue watching to see everything that you're doing, and, just keep up the good work, okay?
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. And thanks to everybody that tuned in.
Yes, thanks everybody for watching, and we'll see you next time with another great warrior. Thank you, David.
My pleasure.
Bye.